This is a conversation with Helen Greiner, who is the CEO of Tertill. Tertill makes a solar-powered robot weeder for home vegetable gardens. When you see the Tertill robot, you might think of the robot vacuum cleaner, the Roomba, by iRobot. This comparison makes sense, and funny enough, they were both made by some of the same people, Helen included. What I think is beautiful about the Roomba and this robot, the Tertill, is that it is so relatively simple, yet provides real value. Vacuuming under the bed is a pain, and I don't have much experience with weeding, but weeding sounds awful. And both of these products are for the consumer market, meaning that they have to be inexpensive enough that many people can afford them. The iRobot Roomba was one of the first successful consumer robots, and it grew the consumer robotics space, which benefited all of us in robotics, from making investment easier to come by, to parts being cheaper, to showing people that robots aren't all Terminator robots. As Helen says before this interview, and has been said before on this podcast, a rising tide lifts all boats. I look forward to seeing how the Tertill does in the future, and if I start a garden, I'll probably get one. I'm Audrow Nash. This is the Sense Think Act podcast. If you like this interview, please consider subscribing. A big thank you to our founding sponsor, Open Robotics. And now, here is my interview with Helen Greiner. Would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Helen Greiner, and I'm a robot enthusiast.
Now, we're going to be talking mostly about Tertill, but I'd love to start, for context, to talk about your whole path in robotics.
Oh, that's a long way. That's a long time.
You want to just tell me, maybe at a high level from grad school, and then you were involved with iRobot and then Sci-Fi?
Well, it started back when I was 11 and I saw Star Wars and fell in love with R2-D2. And R2-D2, he wasn't just a machine, right? He was a character, he had an agenda, he saved the universe, he had a personality, did a lot of expression with his bleeps and bloops. And, since that time, I've always wanted to make things that are more than machines. So I went to MIT to learn how, and it turns out I learned a lot of great engineering there, but they didn't really know how to build robots for the real world. And so right after grad school, I was in grad school at MIT in computer science, although my undergraduate's mechanical, and accepted to the PhD program, but instead decided to co-found iRobot Corporation with Rod Brooks and Colin Angle.
And then, so you, what did you do at iRobot? So you were designing the robot, I believe, or one of the original vacuum cleaner robots.
No, way back when the company first founded, all of us, myself, Rod, and Colin, were actually designing the robots and building them and fabricating them and everything about the robots. But there were, we started iRobot in 1990. It wasn't until 98 we started seriously working on the Roomba, and not until 2002 we put it on the market. So there were a lot of history before that. We are, the longest overnight success, because people hadn't heard about us until the Roomba. But, there was a whole lot of robots that we were building before
that. Were
that.
They mostly military in nature? It was like search and rescue kind of things? Or?
We did robots for so many different industries. We did a robot for oil and gas industry, doing downhole inspections, plug, patch, perforate stuff. We had robots large cleaning robots. We had robots that were in a museum. There was robots that we sold to research labs. We did a toy robot, a baby doll robot with Hasbro.
Cool.
Just so many different robots. But it wasn't until we put robots on the market under our brand that we were, that we had any success.
Interesting. So was it kind of like you were contracting around, like people would want robots, or you'd see opportunities,
Yeah,
or?
it was kind of like any robot for money.
Yep.
Usually would get the large company to bring the dollars, and um,
Yeah.
and we believed the marketing and the market savvy, and we would bring the technology and the creativity and the innovation and the robots, and
Uh-huh.
it sounds good on paper, but what usually happened was the industries work at glacial paces, and
Uh,
the person who was our advocate either moved to another position or another company, and then you almost had
oh,
to start the sales pitch again from
all from
from the
scratch.
beginning. Yeah. So I don't think we had enough top level buy-in at the companies to make it successful. And in some cases, the robot technology was competing with the status quo of how the existing product lines. So,
Hmm.
a larger company wouldn't have that much incentive to, push it forward.
Interesting. And then how did you go towards the Roomba with this? Like,
Well, let's see. Our first employee at iRobot was Joe Jones. Joe had been thinking about some of these things while he was at MIT, and that mapped well with Rod Brooks's behavioral control algorithms, because we really didn't have a lot of resources to put on these smaller robots, um, so we couldn't have the kinds of processing and the kinds of capabilities that some of the robots have today, even the Roomba.
mhm.
um, Joe wrote a white paper in, I think, uh, maybe 97 or 98, saying, hey, we're building these large cleaning robots, we're building all these larger robots, but really we should do the simplest possible thing first. And he spelled out small robot, price point about $200, needs to be fully automated, use the simplest possible sensors rather than, the most capable sensors, and get something out there pretty quickly. And it sounded like a good idea to everybody. So it was
Mhm.
funded with very small amounts of money, because we didn't have a lot of money.
Mhm.
And, they kept building prototypes of it, Joe and the team, and they, uh, got, we could never see a reason why it wouldn't work. And we fully
Yeah,
expected when we started it to see a reason why, because
it
if
wouldn't
one
work.
component's missing, right, it's not a product.
Yep. Gotcha.
Um, there was another robot vacuum on the market. We didn't know that much about it at the time.
Mhm.
Electrolux had one, but it was many thousands of dollars used.
Uh,
It doesn't sound very high tech today, but it used sonar technology, but it made it very expensive. And I
mhm.
think that when a new concept is new, it has to be reasonably inexpensive for people to take that jump. So Roombas might sell sometimes for, up of $1,000 today, but when you're a new company with a new brand in a very new area, it's important that it's a kind of product you can take your wallet out and say, oh, I'll take a risk on that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of people that
Yeah,
are willing
yeah,
to do that because
yeah,
maybe there are way less that are willing to take the risk at like an $1,000 robot
yes.
vacuum cleaner versus a $200 one.
Hmm.
Ah, okay. And then
So
where?
we got the robot on the market, the Roomba. We
Mhm.
still doing the robots for the military, and that actually we got the both on the market in 2002. The robots for the military got moved up because of the war efforts in Operation
Mhm.
Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and then soon after Iraq. They probably would have stayed as military research for a while,
Mhm.
but there was this driving need for bomb disposal robots, and we were
Mm.
right there with the capability that they needed. And at the same time, we put the Roomba on the market, and um, started to get some uh, consumer success. And so these companies never would have had these two disparate areas if one had happened first, right? Because all the resources would have been thrown at that one,
at just
but
one of them.
because they were successful together, and it, you know, it really helped us because I can tell you a lot of the investors didn't believe in the consumer robot market until we had it on the market and it was successful.
Gotcha. So the investors were, or was it like you were funding the efforts with the military robots, and that allowed you to bootstrap the consumer robot?
We were paying for infrastructure with the military contracts because we had large contracts as research contracts as well as having built a pre-product. So the infrastructure was being paid for, like, the offices, and that we had people on staff who were very capable roboticists because we had the ability to pay for them. But we didn't really raise investment capital until 8 years in 1998. That's when we started. And by 2005, when we took it public, we'd raised a total of 38 million, which is peanuts today. That's like Series, A or B today.
Yeah. Okay. And then you raised the capital, and then that let you scale so you could grow the consumer market for the Roomba, or the consumer side of the business for the Roomba.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, after we went public, the military side was going very strong too. But eventually, after I left in 2008, they did spin the military stuff out into a company called Endeavor, which was purchased by FLIR for like over $300 million. And then that was purchased, FLIR was all purchased by Teradyne. So the technology still exists, the robots still exist. A lot of the same people are working on them, but it's no longer iRobot.
Gotcha. What did you, so between 1998 and 2008 or so, when you left iRobot, what were you primarily involved in?
Everything. I was, during that time I was president, chairman, and, everything from sales to media to taking it public, investment, acquisitions, everything.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you decide to go to CyPhyWorks? That was the next step, right?
Yeah. Well, I was looking at what next, and being chairman of a company is kind of the best job, actually.
Really? Why?
It really is, because that's what I was at iRobot, because you have you get to do a lot of interesting things, but you're not you don't have all that operational responsibility. But it's not the best job when you're 40 years old, which is what I was. So I think that when I looked at what I really liked, I liked it when the Roomba and the PackBot, the military robots, were first being developed. The innovation side, when you're getting something the likes of which people haven't seen before out there. And so that's why I wanted to do it again. And I saw that the drone space was the place to do it in.
How did you see it was the space to do it in? Like, what made that clear to you?
It was an untapped market. When I look at drones, it's like a magic technology that solves a lot of the problem. I think it
Mobility
was Gil Pratt, who was at DARPA, now at Toyota Research. I think he's the one who first said the problem with ground robots is the ground, right? There's all this stuff on the ground, right? Especially when you take it outdoors and even indoors with the Roomba. There's a lot of problems you have to face, and a lot of recognition, a lot of knowing what it is and getting around it and negotiation. Whereas a drone, you could just fly right over it, right? Free space is actually easy.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, so you saw that there was potential here because it solves a lot of existing robotics challenges. So you could probably do new and interesting things. Right. But then how CyPhyWorks? And actually, would you kind of speak to the premise of the company?
Well, the CyPhyWorks, the idea we had originally was, at the time, a little less so now, but at the time, the battery technology wasn't there. So the drones would only run a short amount of time, and not enough for any real types of military missions or law enforcement missions. Or even, long-term communication missions. So we had some technology to make a tethered drone. And we were, the first ones out there with a drone that you could stays up in the air for, weeks at a time. So you put it up on a
That's
tether,
crazy.
and you put it up to, put it up to 300 feet in the air, and it just flies all the time. And then you have that station where you can get eyes on something, or you can do communications.
Hmm. So the idea was
Well,
that it had a
I never envisioned that as the only thing the company would do, but I wanted some differentiated technology to go in because there were some drones on the market already.
Mhm. So the idea was you'd have a cable that goes to
Mhm.
the drone, and that cable would send power, and you could also probably do things like maybe some of the control, like the brains of it. Maybe I don't know if you'd want that on the
No,
drone or off
we
the.
were putting the brains all on the robot, so you send it
Ah,
up and it just stays there, or autonomously.
okay,
And well, that's a little bit turnkey today, but at the time we were doing it, it wasn't so much.
gotcha.
Um, we are, uh, you know, that wasn't the only premise of the company. It was a starting point, and so we won
Yep.
some good military, multi-million-dollar contracts around that, and we were working on getting it into an acquisition program.
Ah,
And I can tell you, there are many companies building tethered drones today. So it
yeah.
was sci-fi wasn't successful, but the concept was successful, and it's in pretty hot demand for military applications because of the capabilities to do both surveillance. I getting eyes on
Hmm.
24/7, and also communications. Radios work a lot better when you put them up high. The
Oh,
ground
yeah.
effects are terrible on the transmissions.
Yeah, I bet. It seems to me like a really good way to bootstrap infrastructure. Like if you need to set up quickly, it's like, oh, we have a security camera that's
Yeah.
deployed there through a drone, this kind of thing.
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
boost your radio up and put it real high. Like that's very nice, very clever.
Hmm.
Okay. And so you said, so a few things were interesting there that you said. So first, you said preparing it for acquisition. Does it mean you kind of created the company with the intent of it being bought?
Oh
Or,
no, I am sorry. I meant in that context. I meant military acquisitions, making sure
oh,
that you're in the POM cycle, in the military budgeting cycle, so that the money exists when you're ready with the technology and prototype. Um,
gotcha.
which
So
we
basically,
were, yeah, and at the same time getting to a point where we got it deployed. We did get it deployed with the Rapid Equipment Force, and then we used in Syria and Iraq very successfully by special forces.
gotcha. I bet that feels really good
Hmm.
to
It
like
does.
positively impact our troops. And in both
Right.
iRobot and in CyPhyWorks, it's like you were contributing to some of the
It,
difficult situations
it does.
that resolve them better.
A sci-fi, someone came up, special forces uh, person came up at a conference and said, "Hey, I heard that thing is out there saving lives." So they couldn't tell us much about the missions, of course, but they
Yeah, naturally.
they did tell us it was having a great effect. And the same thing at iRobot once. Once I was speaking at the War College, and I was between two, 3-star general on my right and a 4-star general on my left, and I
That's
assumed
awesome.
everyone would want to go speak to them after the conference. But a lot of the soldiers came up to me, and one guy, I remember, he shook my hand and said, I want to give you my coin because this packbot saved 11 guys on one mission. And that was really rewarding. The Pentagon actually did a study, and the packbots have been credited at that time, even more today, but at that time they'd been credited with saving the lives of hundreds of soldiers and thousands of civilians.
Wow, that's absolutely nuts. It feels like it's kind of like it's amazing, and it's probably hard to wrap your head around, like the abstract notion of saving lives
Mhm.
for this kind of thing. But it's just wonderful. Like, what a crazy thing.
No, it is wonderful.
Huh. And then, so you said that Sci-Fi Works wasn't successful in your opinion, or this kind of thing,
Oh,
or
I think that we had a difference of opinion with the investors that
uh,
I brought on in the direction, and at that time I decided, you know, the person who first deployed the packbots over in Afghanistan,
mhm.
he asked me to come in and join. He became the acquisition executive. That's the person who runs the multi-billion-dollar acquisition program, all of them for the army, and he wanted me to come on and be his special robot advisor. So I decided to
Oh,
take that opportunity because I didn't agree with the direction of sci-fi.
Yeah, that must be frustrating. I've heard many people that I've talked to that have started
Mhm.
robotics companies where the investors want it to go one way and the founders
Yeah,
want to go another way. It's a very frustrating spot.
right, right.
Uh-huh.
But at some point, you got to say, they have their opinion. They're going to bring on their people, and if those people make it happen, the company's going to be successful. If they don't, it won't. And I can tell you,
Gotcha.
this one was really well set up to be successful because there's a really hot demand for the technology.
Yeah. And then but it just wasn't where you were personally interested in taking it. And then this other opportunity popped up to advise on government purchases of robots, right?
Yeah, the government research and development in robots, AI, and machine learning.
That's super cool. So that
Mm.
was,
So I got to work
I,
in the Pentagon for 2 years,
uh-huh.
which was great. I mean, I stayed in Boston where I reside, but I went down there every few weeks to spend days down there, and my office was the Pentagon.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
How was that? Like I don't know much about it or what would be involved. Like what
Uh,
I don't know. How was it?
well, after selling, over $1 billion worth of stuff to the military, right? It was interesting to be on the other side of the table and see some of the, constraints they're under, right? I mean, there's a lot of
Hmm.
hardworking, patriotic, very, very good people. And you say, why can't they just do this? And, sometimes there's a lot of reasons that they just can't do that. Mostly, it's against the law. um, so,
Can you give me
it's,
a specific example?
well, even if they want the technology, it has to go out for competitive bid, and you have to have the
Uh,
evaluation criteria, and you have to, go through the process because someone will complain, write their congressman, and then there'll be a bid dispute. And it's better, especially when you're dealing with billions of dollars, to get the program right from the beginning, so you don't have to, lose it, later on, because the the soldiers need this equipment, right? So sometimes, even if it's a really, really good product and it's going to be the winner, you really have to go through the process.
gotcha. Even yeah. So that's interesting. It's interesting to do that. That's very different than like how startups might operate
Hmm.
for this kind of thing because you don't have the implications like the voters and
Right,
all of
right,
this.
right,
If it goes
right.
badly, you just like do something and fail and try and whatever. So
Hmm.
it's interesting to be on the other perspective. Did you I don't know, like any like I was very impressed. So I talked to a previous episode, Tim Chung from DARPA, about the
Hmm.
sub-T challenge, and I was really impressed with that. The like it seems like a very pragmatic approach in robotics to these hard challenges and
Hmm.
them trying to start these communities around
Right.
this area.
Right. I
How
should say
how
DARPA does have a little more leeway because of the way it's set up to be able to work with universities
mhm.
and, you know, get those great new ideas into the military. But when you get to a large acquisition program, it has to be, you know,
Gotcha.
go through a process.
Yeah. So were you kind of responsible for advising these large purchases, or you'd
I
say,
no, I
or
wasn't.
defining a process, or
I was put in to give an honest opinion on the state of the robot technology,
Mhm.
and I didn't take a role in any particular acquisition program.
Mm,
But I think people kind of thought of me as a trusted advisor, and
I see.
I can't talk too much about it, but I think I really did have a great impact in getting some of the drone and the ground vehicle programs in the right
Mhm.
direction.
And how did that end? So was it just the end of the term? You have a 2-year term, or how does it
Yes,
work?
I actually went until my first appointment ran out, and they would have had me come back, but especially with COVID, like I couldn't even fly down to the Pentagon anymore, and I was at the point where I felt that doing something else to push the robot field further would be, what I'd most want to do.
I see. Okay, and so now this comes to Turtle, right? That's the
Mhm.
next jump.
Yep.
Okay, now tell me a bit about Turtle. Just the setup and the premise and
Right.
everything.
Okay, so Tertill is a company that builds a weeding robot. It was invented by the gentleman that I mentioned, Joe Jones, who invented the Roomba when he was at
Oh.
iRobot.
Hmm.
And him and Roy McKeon, they came out of Harvest Automation, which was an agricultural company. And once they had finished with that, they decided that they wanted to be back in the consumer game.
Hmm.
And, Joe was thinking about all the different applications that have robot potential, and weeding, is really at the top of a lot of people's list of jobs that are just tedious and hard, and you're in the hot sun, and it's a job that you do once in a while, you know find somebody who likes it, right? Just like you find, believe it or not, you find people that do like vacuuming. There's always people
Huh.
like that. But a lot of times people like it, but they like it on their schedule, right? Not when it has to be done. So
Yes.
Joe, thinking about the problem, he looked for a robotic solution because, we believe at Tertill that, and at iRobot, that you don't have to do things exactly like a human does them. In fact, to be more powerful, you don't really want to do things exactly like a human. You want to do them you want to set up the task so a robot can succeed. So an
Hmm.
example is, maybe Roomba can't do everything that an upright vacuum does, but it sure does well going under the beds. That is something that an upright vacuum doesn't do well
It's true.
doing. Under the couches and the robotic applications. It doesn't matter how long it's on.
Hmm.
Um, covering the whole space, and now with the latest technology generations ensuring that the space is covered. So
Hmm.
when you think about it in robot terms instead of in human terms, so one way to do the weeding, to bring it back to Tertill, one way to do the weeding would be, you have a fully dexterous manipulator, and you use your AI vision system with lots of machine intelligence, and you say that's a weed, and then you come down and you have your dexterity to go down and grab the weed and pull it up, and then you have to grab it and pull up the roots.
Hmm.
Or you use advanced lasers or
Spray
a blowtorch
pesticides
or
on it.
something, right? Or
Yeah.
pesticides. And in thinking about that, that's the wrong way, right? Because that plant has already sunk nutrients out of the soil. You have a disposal problem with the plant. And, quite frankly, powerful lasers are expensive, and pesticides are bad for the
So you considered
environment.
lasers.
Yeah. We always
That's so
consider
funny.
lasers because, having a robot with lasers, it's just inherently cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I
but
agree.
but may not be the most practical approach for some
Ah,
applications. So
I'm
what
shocked.
was built instead was a robot that
Oh, you
prevents
have one.
weeds from ever growing.
Hmm.
So with a scrubbing wheels,
Hmm.
it keeps seeds from germinating, and with a spinning weed whacker, if one dares pop its head up, off with its head. And
Yeah,
it
it's
pretty
the
close
Queen's
to
robot.
the original Roomba navigation strategy. It negotiates through the garden and
Hmm.
covers the entire area using local intelligence, but it's got some inventions on it. It's got capacitive sensors that sense the plants,
Hmm.
and it's got a very innovative bump sensor that
Huh.
uses the accelerometers.
So and actually, would you, just for our listeners who are only listening, would you
Mhm.
describe it? Would you
Oh,
describe Turtle a bit?
this is a small, round, green robot. It's about 8.25 inches wide and about maybe 4 inches tall.
Hmm.
And it's got wheels that have cleats on them, four wheels that are chamfered with cleats on them. That makes a very,
Camford? Ah,
just
at an angle. I'm
at
just
an
seeing them as
angle.
they're
Yeah,
at
yeah,
45 degrees
yeah.
tilted so that they kind of like scrape the earth or
Yes,
something.
yes. And in fact, we built a not very good drive system because we want to be scraping the earth when we turn rather than lightly travel on it,
Ah,
like many robot applications.
that's so funny. So you
Yeah,
rigid turn, and so
yeah.
all the
It's a
wheels.
turning.
That's
I think they
or you skid steer is
it's
what?
really the it's really the combination effects of scrubbing and then the weed whacker that makes it do such a good job.
Yep.
Um,
So then in the
like,
middle of the robot, so you have the wheels, and then in the inside of the wheels, in the center of the robot, there's a little tiny spinning thing that has like a wire, like a weed whacker.
yes,
And so it drives over.
it's not just like a weed whacker. It is
It
a weed
is?
whacker. Yes,
Yeah.
this is the
Uh-huh.
only part of the robot that that you have to change. So maybe 3 times a year you have to pull it out and put
Ah.
in just do it like that, and you push in a new one because it does wear out when it hits rocks
Yep.
and other things in the garden.
Huh.
Uh, it
Makes
does
sense.
have a little USB port here that, oops, it does have a little USB port here that if you take this off, you can see a little mini DIN, I think it is, where
Huh.
you can plug it in and charge it. But the great thing about this robot is you never have to because it's got a solar cell on the top. So you put it in
Awesome.
your garden at the beginning of the growing season and you leave it there. And every day when the sun comes out, it charges up. When it gets down to, you know, when it goes out in weeds, and when it gets down to something like 70% battery, and these are all changeable numbers, but 70% battery, it stops weeding and it charges again. And then when it gets to a certain number, it'll come back out and do the weeding. And then when it gets down, and that way we really use the batteries really lightly. So they last for years, if you're using them so nicely. And it makes it run throughout the day. So if it's cloudy in the morning, right, it'll keep running in the afternoon. It also has some very intelligent algorithms, so it'll go sit in the sunlight rather than sit
Really?
under a tomato bush. So it's
Huh.
really a very intelligent little robot that lives in your garden, runs on sunshine, and does the weeding so you don't have to.
Gotcha. So it drives, you basically set it in your garden
Mhm.
and just leave it. And then
Mhm.
what it's going to do is charge with the sun and
Mhm.
go knock out some weeds when it drives around for a small period
Yep.
of time each day.
Mhm.
Um, and
Intermittently throughout the day. So it doesn't just come out once, it comes out a few times every day and does the job.
gotcha. And so, how much ground can this little robot cover?
Um, about 200 square feet of a garden. So that's about, an average size in-ground garden.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have smaller ones these days with, a raised bed, but, if you're putting in a garden, you're up there. So it covers a reasonable sized garden.
Gotcha. And it detects the weeds to kill because they're small enough to drive over.
Well, it doesn't really detect the weeds to kill. It prevents weeds from ever growing. What we have to do is protect the plants. Now, as I mentioned, the capacitive sensors are very good, and the accelerometer-based bump sensor is very good. But if something's less than 4 inches, it will consider it a weed. So we do what all good roboticists do to make robots work, and that's cheat. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the way we cheat is if you put a seed in,
Oh, you're
what I'm
prepared.
yeah,
Gosh.
well, I am. What I'm holding is a thin wire that's molded into a curved shape that you could put around a seed that you plant or a small seedling that you plant by just pushing it into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
If you plant a row of carrots, for example, we have a row guard, and you just push these along the row so the robot can't get to your carrot seedlings. And once the plant's 4 inches tall, you could take these out or leave them in, and it's really your choice.
Doesn't
But if you
matter so
take them
much.
out, you could just reuse them.
Gotcha. Okay. So when it's driving around, does that mean that its weed whacker is always going? So does it
No,
sense the
it
little
has.
plants, or does it?
It can sense the plants. We've discovered that having a duty cycle does actually help the performance. So we can sense, or we can just have a
Just
duty
drive.
cycle. Just and get them all.
Gotcha.
It doesn't
Okay.
take that much. It doesn't take that much power, especially when it's not hitting anything.
Oh, you just keep it spinning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We don't
Gotcha.
just keep it spinning. It's got a duty cycle.
What do you mean exactly by the duty cycle? It's on for a little
Uh,
bit, it's off,
yeah, it
it's
comes on
going.
for a little bit. It goes off. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay, so it's like almost like it's full power, then off for a little bit, then full power, then off for a
Yeah.
little bit while it's
Yeah.
driving. So it's
Yeah.
going
You
pulse,
need to
pulse,
have a
pulse,
weed
pulse.
whacker. You need to have them spin. They're like a very high speed weed
Yep.
whacker, right?
Gotcha. And then so what exactly is it sensing in the environment? So you mentioned that it can move into the sun if it's in the shade,
Well,
this kind of thing.
it
Like how
just
does it
senses that with its
solar
power
panel?
system, right? With its solar panel.
So it's just going to
Um,
drive until it reaches some sun kind of thing, or how does it work?
it yeah, it just doesn't stop if it's too shady. It keeps going for a while, and it looks at the average reading over time and goes back to where
Gotcha.
it looks if it is if wants to know, make sure there is some sun before it starts looking for sun. So
Yeah.
if you have an average reading, and none of these things. These things are all tunable. So we've done the best job we can, tuning that we could do, but they are things that we can vary if we need to at any time.
Yeah. Okay. So I am imagining that this takes a lot of lessons from the Roomba. So like one thing that was very obvious to me
Mhm.
as a like Roomba tie back is that you have the one button. So like with the Roomba, I have heard that it's like you just have the one button to start it. And this,
Yes.
yeah, it has the one button as well. So you
Right,
push it and then it
right.
just goes and you don't have to worry
But
about anything.
it didn't always have one button, right?
The
That was a
Roomba, yeah.
lesson learned. We had 3 buttons, and they were labeled S, M, and L, and so small, medium, and large. And we
Rooms.
get questions all the time. What's a small room? What's a medium room? What's a large room? So then we started putting numbers out there, and then people are really confused because they don't know the area of their room. And so it would have been much better to have one button. Now they say clean on it, right? So that's what you want to do. You want to clean, you press one button.
Mhm.
And the on-off switch, the first ones we had on the Roomba were labeled 0 and 1. So
Oh.
obvious, right? One is
Yeah.
on and 0 is off. But
Yeah.
people would say, "Well, I put it on. Oh, isn't that on?" And
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it was not obvious to most people what 0 and 1 meant.
That's so funny.
Well, it's kind of funny that we would do that, right?
Yes. I mean, as a roboticist, like I was like, oh yeah, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
I know what you're going for. It's like I'll use, but it's not for all of the other anyone who's a
Right.
general consumer. I see what they mean with the
Right.
0 seems like O for
Right.
on. I
Yeah.
guess
So
O is off too. So I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, that's what the confusion was. Like, why? What about off? So we designed it with one button, and the one button, uh, it's something that people can understand, right? You put it in the garden, you press a button, and it stays there, and it's on, and it's running in the garden for the rest of the growing season.
Hmm. And then so the operation of this is you just put it there, you push the button, and then you walk away until winter, I suppose.
That would be ideal. That would be ideal. But in reality, because we live in reality, mine, and even though I made my space pretty amenable, I am a little bit of a lazy gardener, so my place isn't really nice and beautifully raked or anything like that.
As a good roboticist would be.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
I had to free it a few times during the year, like it would get stuck and I would give it a kick. But that's a few times as opposed to every day. You never have to charge it. You do have to replace the weed whackers every few weeks.
Yep.
But apart from that, you're good to go for the season. So it really is, I'd say, one of the most, if not the most autonomous robot out there, because it's solar
That's
powered.
outside.
You don't have to charge it, and it just stays there and does the job for you, like a little creature living in your garden,
like a turtle. Yeah.
like a turtle.
Huh. Yeah, I see. And so you mentioned that the control style or the control scheme is a bit like the original Roomba. Does that mean it's going to just drive around randomly? And then eventually, like in the limit, it will have covered the whole garden space.
Yes. Although it's never been random. The Roombas were never random. They use some, local intelligence based on the local sensor readings to negotiate along walls, around obstacles, and to try and cover a certain area and then move to the next area. So neither, the original Roombas weren't random and this one's not random. We don't have a full positioning system yet. And you do have to put a boundary around the area where it's working. Like there was a luxury in the house that
Walls.
Originally we had a boundary because of the walls. Turns out most vegetable gardeners have a boundary, or they don't mind putting one in. You can take a piece of wood, you can take the row guards, the pieces of metal that it comes with. You can buy a edge stripping, a metal one from Home Depot or Amazon. There's a lot of easy solutions for it. But it is one of the reasons why we don't advertise it for landscape beds, because it's a little tricky to explain where it can and it can't work.
Oh.
And, you do have to have a boundary around it. And some landscape bed, that's fine. I've got one in a landscape bed in the front of my house, and it's wonderful, right? I don't have to weed it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But I didn't mind having it, where you have like, some beautiful shrubs. I have some bamboo with a bamboo root barrier around that most people can't stop bamboo from growing, but my bamboo isn't growing. So, but everything else was growing in that bed. So I put a barrier around where the bamboo is spreading from, and I'm giving it a chance to grow in. I also put one on my gravel last year. I got pea gravel, and we can't advertise it for that either, because at the end of the season, I'd look down and there'd be some little broadleaf plants growing that had established a root structure. So the type of weeding we do, preventing weeds, doesn't quite work. But where I didn't have the turtle, the weeds were literally up to my shoulder, my shoulder. Like, it's crazy with how fast these things could grow in a growing season if you never take care of it. So for me, it works great if you don't mind a few little leaves in your gravel, but advertising it for that would be hard. But we have a lot of users who use them on landscape beds because they figured it out for themselves that I meet the criterion, and so I can have it running and it's not a problem. You got to have your plants at a space at least about a foot apart. You have to have not too undulating terrain. So the robot can drive
through. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the robot can go right between them. You want to have not too much undulations, a barrier around it, and it doesn't work on really chunky mulch, like a lot of landscape beds are mulch, and that prevents weeds. I put mulch in fresh, even last year, about a month later, right, I've got weeds all over. So if it's really chunky mulch, it won't work, but I have it working on mulch beds that are finer mulch, and it works fine.
Gotcha. So what have been some of the biggest challenges with this robot? I'm imagining weatherproofing it. It's interesting to have the small set of sensors. I don't know.
Well, I actually jumped into this after they kickstarted it, and I bought one on the Kickstarter, so I can actually speak to this because Joe started the company, and I knew him and some of the other guys, and of course I'm going to support the Kickstarter. And they delivered it, and I put it in the garden, and I think it worked for a little bit, then it stopped working, and I didn't care because it was a Kickstarter, right? And it's a robot, and I buy lots of robots on Kickstarter, and quite frankly,
I like that. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Anyone can sell me a robot on Kickstarter because I want robots to exist. I want more robots to exist. Yeah.
I like that.
So everyone should always support the small robot companies. Just get the robots, try them out. Like that, so many people said that to me about Roomba, right? I got one of the early ones, and I'd look at the generation they have, and it's like, no, that's 10 years in. you need to get to these companies when they're first kickstarting, when they're, just have it on the market for a few years. But I got the robot on the Kickstarter, but it stopped working, and I didn't really care. So, but they actually came over, took a look at it, and replaced it. And then I put it in my vegetable gardens, and I was actually amazed that it worked. It was like night and day, right? It was like, instead of going to my garden and it was a weedy mess, because I'm not one of those people who does it every week, on
Yeah.
time. Um, Instead of going there with my daughter and, I get distracted because I don't like the weeds in it, instead we can go and garden together, right? Instead of,
Hmm.
instead of it being a chore, it's like a more fun experience about growing your own food. So I
Gotcha.
really loved it. And they, I was looking around of what to do after after the military appointment, and
Hmm.
um, I called them up because my mind, I was thinking about outdoor robotics because I'm not going to go indoors, right? Because Roomba's inside. um, I was thinking, hey, I see the robot lawnmower is taking off. I've got a
Hmm.
turtle weeding my garden. There might be another space that, they've maybe thought about that I'm not pursuing, and I could take that and learn from them. And instead, they invited me to come on and be CEO.
Wow. Gotcha. Awesome. And so how long have you been with them now as CEO?
um, it's been it's been over a year now.
Gotcha. So where, actually, like a little bit about the company. How large are you guys?
Well, we don't really disclose that because you kind of keep it to yourself until it's something to
Ah,
really brag about. But we're
gotcha.
a very small team. We're very agile. We have the robot on the market on our Shopify site. We have it on at Amazon. We've just
Yep.
released a new product to also makes gardening easier. It's not a robot, but it does.
Hmm.
Uh, it is. It shares the app with the turtle. Um,
Okay.
so this is the space that I love when a small team can get stuff going quickly and get it out on the market.
It does seem like the most fun part
Mhm.
to me,
Mhm.
anyways. The whole growing everything, very fun.
Yep.
So then you guys are, what kind of things have you been, so since you've been CEO, what kinds of things have you been helping the direction of the company move towards?
Oh well, just switching from a technology brand to a more lifestyle brand,
Ah,
getting the word out more. We got on This Old House last year in USA Today, Wall Street Journal. Um, they're actually practicing filming for an HSN slot. We'll be on Rachel Ray on the 16th.
cool.
So there's uh, I closed $4 million funding round
Wow.
last year. So just trying to take it from where it was, which was great, to
Hmm.
uh,
More consumer facing
yeah, more
kind of thing.
consumer facing and more sales.
Yeah, gotcha. What an awesome thing. I mean, it just seems like from my perspective, like the idea of pulling weeds in a garden is like I don't know, because you're right. Like I'm not going to be diligent about it every week or whatever. So this kind of thing, it seems like a really nice use of a simple robotics solution to it. Like it
Yes.
can just drive around, mow down the big weeds. You can like garden around your plants, maybe if they grow really close to your existing plants. But it's I don't know, it just makes the work. It does like 80% of the work kind of thing
Right. Right. Yeah, I
for
mean,
a
I
simple
still
thing.
had some weeds around the very edge of my garden. I could have ignored them. Sometimes I choose to pull them out, but it's a choice, right? Not something you have to
Hmm.
go and spend a lot of time doing.
And you don't have like this giant, like, I don't know, field or bush of a garden that like you can't get to anything and this kind
Yes.
of thing. Because this is getting to all those plants that grow super fast, very
Hmm.
early, and
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
you don't have to deal with them.
Right. And it goes to our mission is to make gardening easier for people. But why do we want to do that? So more people take it up. A lot of people took it up in the pandemic, by the
Oh,
way. Studies say like 17 million more people took up gardening. So great timing for it.
yeah.
Um, but we'd like to encourage even more, right? Because what's more healthy for the planet? Shipping it in, sometimes from another country,
Oh,
or
yeah.
wasting all that transportation, all that pollution. Big ag has a lot of pesticides used, not good
It's
for the
true.
pollinators, not good for the environment, not good for yourself. So having an organic garden at home if you can. Going to a CSA that's organic in your area.
What's
I mean,
CSA?
these CSA is um, I don't actually know what
Is
it
it like
stands for,
consumer
but you go.
safety or
No,
something?
no.
Or
It's when
I,
you have a farm that allocates all their produce that they make to a set of customers, and they deliver it, or you go pick it
oh,
up every week. So it's kind of like a share in a farmer's, you know,
harvest.
harvest.
That
Yeah.
that's
A
wonderful.
very
Yeah,
good thing to do, by the way. We're not against that. We totally promote that. I've done it many times when I've not been growing my own stuff.
yeah.
And I didn't grow my own stuff when I was doing iRobot because I knew that I didn't have time, right? I knew that it would
Oh,
take
yeah.
too much time and effort, and I'd go on a business trip and I wouldn't be able to weed the garden. So something that I really love to do is grow, and I couldn't do it because of the weeding issue. So what I love
Mm.
about this company is we're solving this real problem that people have, and it's good for the earth because the the most nutritious, delicious food you can get is actually from your garden. I don't know if you have a garden or if you've ever grown vegetables.
I've grown vegetables. I'm in San Francisco in a little apartment, but I'm
Mhm.
likely moving to Texas in the near future.
Oh,
And
cool.
so one of the things we are most excited about, my fiance and I, are getting chickens and having a garden. So we're right on
Awesome.
the same thing with you.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I hope you'll have a turtle in the garden
I think,
or a
yeah,
few of them.
a few
Um,
of them.
so, because of the nutritious, delicious food, organic, being able to, save on that transportation, pollution, the the pesticides, but also, people will take, two, a bunch of carrots and put them in a plastic bag, right? And then you have
The
plastic
waste
waste
of the
along with
plastic.
everything else.
Huh.
So if you need something, food waste is a big problem too, right? I've read studies that between a third and a half of the food is wasted between when you pick it and when it gets to your table,
Oh,
and what you don't eat, right? There's a
that's
lot of
crazy.
it's crazy numbers. But if you have it in your garden, if you need it, you just go get it for that night, and it's better than a refrigerator to have it on the vine.
Yeah. Huh. I really like that perspective where it's clever, and I wasn't thinking of it until you brought it up right now, that this kind of has a lot of, like, you can produce your own healthy food, which is really, really nice. And then it requires less of the whole infrastructure required for going and buying food. The plastic that it's coming in, the shipping, the pesticides and things that are when the thing is being grown from a huge agricultural company. Um, so it's really benefiting the individual. And I
So,
really like that
they
perspective.
say farm to table when you go to a CSA, and we go a step further and backyard to table.
Local.
Yeah. But
Huh.
we do encourage CSAs, right? If you don't have the opportunity to grow your own vegetables, a
They're a
CSA is a
great thing.
wonderful way to support a local farmer.
Yeah, like I'm a big fan of the regenerative agriculture approaches where they put a lot of effort into the soil and
Mhm.
have like a smaller number of animals. And it sounds very similar to the CSA
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
probably how they structure things. Interesting. It's so interesting to me that it's a small robot with kind of like big ambitions of
It
helping
does.
people and helping the planet and this kind of thing.
Mhm.
Do you I don't did you in you figuring like joining this company, did you have those ideas about this, or is this something that's kind of come along since you've been with the company, or I don't know. Like
Well,
how did you come to that?
I did see it as a way to encourage people to grow nutritious and delicious food, but I don't think
Yep.
I'd really studied too much on how big ag and the pesticides and the transportation from other countries, um, and just what it takes to get food on the table.
Uh-huh.
I honestly just love growing. I love to see a garden come to life and
I
produce,
bet.
hundreds of pounds of food.
Do you so I don't know, because I mean I've grown food a little bit but not never really much. Can you, like, so if I have a yard that is, say I have one turtle's worth of garden space.
Mhm.
So I have 200 square feet. That was
Mhm.
correct, right? For one
Yeah,
turtle
yeah, yeah.
of garden space. How much food can I make from that if I'm gonna do a good harvest?
If I had to guess, it would be a few hundred pounds
A few
if
hundred.
you really grow well and you use fertilizer. We
Ah,
actually just put out another product. There's not a robot, but I'll just briefly describe it. It's a
yeah.
fertilizer product. So a lot of folks who beginning gardeners don't know that they need fertilizer. A lot of folks don't get their soil tested, and then they come and they say, "I've just got a black thumb." It's like, no, you don't have a black thumb. You've got
You have
crap
dead
soil.
soil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we put out a fertilizer plan, and the trick that we're doing is we're going to ship it with a soil test. And when you get the
Oh,
results of the soil test, it goes right to the Tertill app, and we send you the fertilizer that you need. So instead of having to, get a PhD in soil chemistry and figure out whether whether you need,
whatever
potassium or
ingredient.
magnesium or whatever, or all the micronutrients, like, there's 26 of them or something like that, we'll close that loop and ship you exactly what you need.
That's super cool
Yeah.
because I've heard of like a similar idea for like exercise related things or people with their nutrients, where it's like you take a nutrient test or
Mhm.
say your goals or whatever it might
Right,
be, and
right,
then they send you the appropriate supplements. It's so cool to do that
right.
for
I
a
found some.
garden where
Right,
you go and you try the soil and then you
right,
say, oh, it
right.
actually needs these things.
So I can't say if the nutrient thing is true or not, but I know the soil test works. Every land grant university has been doing soil tests, and a lot of them are at the point now where they've spun it out. Um, uh, developed new nutrient recommendations based on the soil test and tested it for many, many years. We're working with Cornell University, where we, get these initial recommendations and then we augment them. So this is something that has been studied, and it is science. It's not, you know, whenever I hear something about nutrition, I'm worried that it's
Like fad
it's
science or
pseudoscience. Yeah, yeah. But
pseudoscience.
soil science is not pseudoscience. Horticulture is not pseudoscience. This is real stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, it really drastically improves the, I don't know, yield of the plants, you're saying, if you consider the
Yes.
nutrients that the plant. I mean, it
Yes,
makes
and
sense. Like we
some
need a
people
basic
don't even
nutrition.
know, right? Some people, they get a few little tomatoes on the tomato plant, and they're perfectly happy because they don't know any better, and they don't know you can have this lush green garden if you
Huh.
fertilize the plants, and they're really heavy eaters, right? Because there's so much, vegetables that they're producing, that if you don't do it, your soil just
Oh,
gets
you mean
worse
the
and worse and
plants?
worse every day. Yes, yes, they're
So the
heavy.
plants are
Yeah, they eat.
sucking nutrients from
They are
the soil.
sucking nutrients out of the soil. So even if you start out and you've got great soil, those vegetables are going to suck it out over time. And
Huh.
every university that the horticultural universities, they all recommend fertilizing and doing a soil test every 3 years. So that's why we got the parameters of the program that we put out.
That's so cool. What would you think about like supplementing with chickens or something that are going to make
Even
manure?
better, even better. I've had uh, friends who do that. Even composting yourself, you could do that too.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but for people that don't have the space, don't have the time, don't want to do that, because of the environment that they're in, they might get
Fertilizer
complaints
is
of
way
their
quicker,
labors. Yeah, you could just do it
much easier.
with fertilizer. But we're not ever going to say don't do that. If you want to do that, that's what you should be doing.
Hmm. Yeah, and plus all the bugs and stuff that chickens eat with this
Yeah.
kind of thing. And
Not
then,
not not everyone can get chickens either.
yeah, it's true. I think maybe it's like state and
The
county
neighbors might
specific.
complain. Don't get roosters.
Yes. Yeah. In San Antonio, where I'm looking, you're not allowed to get roosters, but you can have as many, I don't know, hens as you would
Yeah,
like
yeah.
for this kind of thing. I'm so
Oh,
excited about it.
it's wonderful, and you can get the eggs. And yeah, I grew up with chickens,
Uh-huh.
and
Oh, you
rabbits
did?
and everything. Yeah.
Huh. So it seems to me, just kind of bigger picture even, it seems to me that you think that we have like, there's a lot of problems in the world and with agriculture and everything. And it seems like your approach is kind of like a bottom up approach. So it's like get the people doing things make it easier for the people to structure
Mhm.
things so that they don't have to rely on these big systems
Mhm.
quite as much, can eat healthier. Also, one of the benefits we didn't bring up is having people get outside to go garden and this kind of
Yes.
thing. Like it's a huge, like physical activity for that kind of thing seems really nice. But
Yeah. Lots
like a
of research.
bottom-up approach.
Yeah, lots of research studies show that gardening is good for your health. Um, Less scientific, it is good for your soul. It is good for, it's just really, really good for you. Um, so, it is something that we do want to promote.
Mhm. Selfishly, one thing I would love if it was like, I don't know if you guys will be doing additional products, but if you made like an automatic chicken house.
And it'll have to take it right to your garden. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine if you got the chickens scratching around there and they poop and all. But if you're gonna get the chicken poop, I would actually, compost it or something first.
Okay. Gotcha. So let's see. The turtle robot sounds awesome. We have a bit more time. I would love to talk more about your path and your opinions on robotics and this kind of thing. So starting with all that, you've made a lot of transitions. It seems like you've been on top of all these really cool areas in robotics. Um, what, like, I
Right.
don't know how.
You said I made a lot of transitions, but I've been doing this since 1990, right? So
It's true.
I did iRobot for 18 years, and took it public, served chairman for three
Yeah.
more years. So I don't think of myself that moves around too quickly, right?
Yes.
I really jump into something. Uh, but yes, I've been able to see the growth of the industry, and every robot success I consider a success for the entire industry. A rising tide truly does float all boats.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, and I was meaning transition more like problem domains
Mhm.
for this kind of thing, because it was
Right.
military, and then it was home, and then it was drones, and then
Mhm.
then it was figuring out how government works
Right.
with
Right.
funding for military. So it's again a little more
Right.
military, but now it's a home robot for
Mhm.
agriculture
Right.
or
Right.
like gardens.
Right.
W-
But it all comes together, right? Because I knew a lot about home robots, but now the
Yep.
areas that I'm learning about with a great advisory board is,
Hmm.
I've been a gardener, right? But I'm not a horticulturist, right? I haven't studied that. But,
Yeah.
we've got great advisors who are amazing horticulturalists
Hmm.
that, have shown us, the science behind it.
Yeah. How do you, so I guess one thing that's really interesting to me is it feels like with iRobot and with Sci-Fi and with Turtle, you're picking very pragmatic robotics applications. Like given where the technology is at the time, you pick something
and
where the
and,
robot
and
can
also
provide.
also in the Pentagon as well, but I can't talk as much about that. But
Well,
yes, I was
if you ever,
advocating for the
very pragmatic.
practical robot applications, and let's push them forward.
If you ever can talk about that, I would love to do another interview on that because that would be very, very interesting. I don't know if it like has a time way of whatever,
I
but
don't think that would ever come to pass. Not because they were particularly secret, because some vendors win and some vendors lose, and
yeah,
this is not my story; it's their story.
yes. But can you tell me a little bit about that perspective of like just how you've kind of honed in on these spots where you can make a
Mhm.
simple robot that has a few parts that's something that consumers can buy, and then it provides a lot of value, like Roombas helping people so they don't have to vacuum, especially under the bed, Turtle so that it's like it makes having a garden a lot more feasible for lazy people like
Mhm.
me, where it's like now I can do that. I can
Mhm.
not do 80% of my weeding.
Mhm. Um, we had some amazing experiences at the first part of iRobot. For those 8 years before we were doing the Roomba, we did get
Hmm.
some military contracts, so we were developing the packbots.
Yep.
But all those other areas that I spoke about, oil and gas, commercial cleaning, toys and games, um, we did some space exploration, and
Hmm.
we really felt like we honestly felt that these areas weren't wrong.
Hmm.
We just didn't have all the pieces in place, and we didn't. Um, it turned out on the downhole world, the price of batteries went up at the time, and then on the commercial cleaning, the company felt that it would obsolete the products that they were building, and so we had all these areas in our heads that we knew that there could be successful robots. Like, I really think that commercial cleaning is a great place for robots.
Hmm.
Although a lot of companies just buy a Roomba now because you can get, a few of them. And
That it's
um,
all good. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like the cell phone, right? You don't say, I'm going to build a cell phone for industry, although that was, big with BlackBerry and stuff, but you just buy a consumer cell phone and use it. But I really think that there were a lot of industries that it's great business opportunity even today. And we were there, but we couldn't make it happen. But the timing was just wrong. And I do honestly believe that a lot of times it's just matching the technology to the market, and it's
Hmm.
not. A lot of times we were ahead of our time. I see some space robot companies starting out, and I want them to be very successful. We, you know, the first business model that iRobot had was to do the first robot steps on the moon, right? That was
Wow.
coming out of university. That's what we thought
Yep.
would,
Be the thing.
get some big sponsors, and they'll be sure to, help us do that. And um, we actually got further than you would imagine, even in,
Huh.
92. We had a
Wow.
flight test at Edwards Air Force Base for the people who make brilliant pebbles, and we did some,
Oh, so cool.
we didn't get to space, right, but we were doing it,
Pretty
and
close.
they lost their launch, they lost their launch vehicle, and now they're all launch vehicles commercially, right? So,
Hmm.
I think the companies today have a better shot, and I wouldn't say we were wrong. We were just,
Early.
30 years ahead of our time. So it really is market timing as well. I mean, you can see what's going on in logistics and the number of companies that are being very successful in fulfillment centers. And
Hmm.
because the time for that market has really come and the market need is there. If we had tried that in the 90s, it was before e-commerce, right? It wouldn't have
Yeah.
worked.
How do
So,
you, so, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it really is picking the market and the timing as well.
How do you pick the market and the timing? Like any thoughts or heuristics on
Um,
thinking about that?
well, I
You've tried it
recently,
for sure.
yeah, it's I think it was Will Sutton who said, why do you rob banks? It's because that's where the money is. You kind of look where the money's flowing, and you can see
Oh,
money today in logistics. You can see money today. Don't rob banks. That's not what we're saying.
yeah.
um, in the e-commerce, incredible growth, right? And obviously I don't think it's capped out, right? I keep like buying stuff every day on
Yeah.
online. Um, Underwater robotics, right? There's just so people are looking at how to service the wells, how to produce geothermal wells, right? There's so many the wind farms that are offshore. There's so many applications for underwater, being able to go out and do something, and then
Yeah.
there's uh, all the vehicle robotics, right? Even the switch to electric power, which is happening now. I mean, that helps, I think, promote the robots,
Hmm.
robotic, robot inside. Uh, and I can honestly say, at iRobot, as we had all the sticky notes on the wall, all the different industries, we had autonomous cars up there, right? We were watching
Wow.
the
Yeah.
grand challenges, and we hadn't even entered one, right? But we decided that the market timing wasn't there, and we didn't see how we would ever get insurance, and so we put it off the table. And
Mm.
it really took a company like Google to jump in and get those regulations changed.
To
So
start
I think
moving.
we were
Yeah.
right not to go there, but you know, you see,
Gotcha.
companies like Cruise, Riven, Zoox, all these companies,
Hmm.
still pushing on it, and of course Tesla and others.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, it is very interesting, all those areas. Where do you go to get information for these things? So you can look where the money flows. Do you have any advice on how someone would see where the money is flowing?
Um, I think you have to become an expert in the industry that you're entering. I don't say that lightly, right? Because at iRobot, we didn't at first. We thought we would be the technology guys, and it wasn't until we became industry experts that we had success. So sometimes the best way is to hire someone who's been in the industry. If you're trying to disrupt it, you don't want to take everything they say, right? Because you're not going to disrupt it if you do the status quo. But people who know the economics of it, the Mick Maltz started Kiva, right? He had done Peapod, I think it was. He was involved in one of the other, e-commerce delivery things and didn't get it to work. And then he had so much experience with it, so he knew the field in figuring out what would work.
Yeah. So that's kind of a nice pair. You have someone who really understands the industry, and then maybe some people that understand the technology very well. And if you can kind of marry the two, then that seems like a good way.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
or bring people on, learn about it. I think a lot of roboticists have usually you're a little bit of a jack of all trades if you're a roboticist, so you're probably pretty good at picking up new things. So it is possible to learn about. There's plenty of information on the web. There's plenty of people who are willing to talk to you. There's all these companies that just put out market research for a living, right? There's so much information out there thanks to Google and others, right? That it's not like it was in the 90s where you go to the library, right?
Yeah, gosh. Now everything is just a Google away. It's a crazy time. Okay. What do you think? So if someone wanted to start a company now in robotics, what advice would you give them?
Be ready for ups and downs. There are a few, to get on the rocket ship, so to speak. Locust Robotics seems to be on a good trajectory. But even then, right, they were incubated at Quiet Logistics for quite a few years before they spun out. So they had that opportunity to get the technology ready before, before the, going for that, economic rocket ship.
Gotcha.
So
before getting funding and
a lot of times you can find something that's like, a lot of times if you trace things back, it's not that people just got together and built something, but there's some history behind it, right? It was
working.
or it failed somewhere else and you're taking it in, or because the reason it didn't work, or at a university gestating, DARPA grant, DARPA Subterranean Challenge funded it. There's so many. It could come from a large company that doesn't want to take it forward, spin out a company from it. But just getting it to the point and getting all the capital together, just a straight shot, I think is reasonably difficult. You can do some alternative funding, like government contracts, like not just SBIRs, but there's many different programs in the government to try and get the innovative people to get the technologies there.
So SBIR, that's Small Business Innovation Research, right?
Yeah.
How do you, so if you want to pursue the path of an alternate source of funding so you can kind of bootstrap a startup and do the market research so you can find a good fit, how does one learn about these government research grants or government grants that way they could do?
Well, you can learn about the process by reading it, right? It's very easy. SBIR program does a great job of putting everything out there. But in reality, you should be talking to people that have a need for your idea, because if you're not, it's a real statistics aren't there for you not to get something if you haven't been talking to people about your technology, about the way you see the problem, your innovation. because it's hard to get things from a proposal, really. It's not that you cannot win, right? But it does help too. But I would also look at the other types of programs that the government runs in innovation. There's some contests. The incubators are amazing these days.
Do you
Y
mean like,
Combinator,
I was just going to
Mass
say,
Challenge. Mass Robotics. Right
is
here
that
in
a
the Boston area.
Massachusetts specific thing? Or
Mass
Mass
Robotics
Robotics?
is, I think it's a little more national now. They have companies that are, not just in Massachusetts. The actual physical Mass Robotics is in Massachusetts, but I've heard of companies that have participated that are from around the country. Oh, we're actually doing a Turtle. We're doing a Mass Robotics accelerator right now with Amazon Web Services. That's been very, very good
What does it
in
mean?
learning experience.
So it means you're doing an accelerator to get your stuff using Amazon Web Services, or using it?
They're coming in and they're giving classes on what technologies Amazon Web Services has, about RoboMaker, about the infrastructure behind it, which you know so well.
Yeah.
And also panels on raising venture capital, panels on
That's
exiting,
wonderful.
panels on all these things. And you might say, hey, you don't need that, Helen. Why are you taking up this space? You can always learn more. Like, it's a different funding environment from what I did with iRobot. Right, we were one of the first. Right, I would get comments from venture capitals like, oh. We don't make investments in this space. That's too science fiction. My partners would kill me.
Oh, really?
Those. Yeah. But I persevered, right? And I found some very, very good forward-looking venture capitalists to come in. I forgot where I was going, but there's. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you found these forward-looking venture capitalists, and it helped you find. It basically let you proceed, even though the times weren't quite there. So now we're at a different time in the investment community, and these incubators seem to be really nice. Mass Robotics and all the talks and all the education they're providing sounds wonderful.
Right. And in our case, one of the reasons we're participating is we, the data infrastructure that Amazon Web Services has, of course, is great for storing the data that we're collecting.
Yeah. So are you using like their IoT service? I think it works well with. I don't have experience hands-on with Amazon Web Services and RoboMaker and these kinds of things, other than like some basic S3 stuff or whatever it is. But are you using like their Greengrass platform, which is for Internet of Things?
Well, we are actually not. We're on a much lower powered processor, but we're learning about it to see if we can make use of it
in the future.
Microbots, for example, the simulation environment that RoboMaker, which is built on
I think Gazebo,
right? That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So
not sure
can
if
we
Gazebo,
make use of that to augment our current simulations, which are probably not as high fidelity as Amazon has been able to put together, and in the changes in the environment and stuff. So you can always learn more. And I was saying the funding environment, right? The with in iRobot times, right? They didn't have this, convertible notes as much, and certainly safes hadn't been invented. And now, if someone was starting a robot company, I'd recommend start a safe, which is
What's a
kind of it's a investment. It's for like a convertible note, but it's not a debt instrument. It is. It basically just converts to equity when another funder puts a price on it later. So you basically sign up, you get a discount on the on the round, and some people don't even have a discount on the round, no interest, and it lets people come in and fund your company. it turns out there's a lot of high net worth individuals out there now who are willing to, fund robot companies.
Hmm.
So you can go out, start a safe, and start getting that traction with investors, and maybe it's 25,000, 100,000, a quarter million at a time. But it's easier
Hmm.
for them to make that decision. Like, we've had to make that decision, kind of on the spot, rather than the process you have to go through to get a lead VC. So you can
Mm.
get that funding going, and then when you go to a lead VC, you have that traction already, and so hopefully some good names, names people have,
Heard of, for
people
sure.
have, yeah, respected in
Hmm.
the industry, funding the company, and also it gives you advocates for the company, people you can call for help, and um, to push to the next level. So,
Yeah,
my only point is, not safe or not. There's a lot of different
alternative.
mechanisms
Hmm.
to get funded, but the environment does change, and you have to keep up with that environment. So, no matter how much experience you have, joining something like an incubator can be helpful.
Yeah. So you guys are doing the incubator now, which is so cool. You're doing the AWS one. That is an incubator?
Yeah, it had a criterion. You can't do over a few $1 million of business. So we still made the cut. So
Yeah. Gotcha. Ah, that's really cool. Let's see. If there was, do you think so? The whole con, so with, I guess actually, when you are creating, well, so one thing that's different with robotics versus other industries, I feel like, so if you're doing like
Mhm.
a software as a service thing, so it's going to be some web app that people use. Investors look a lot at, are you already getting users? Are you already showing that you're
Mhm.
profitable or whatever? With robotics, there's a big investment in capital, and you I don't know, the model is different because you have to build up
Right,
your robots and you have to building up the
right.
supply chain and manufacturing.
I think
It's Yeah, go ahead.
no, I think that's true, but it's less true now than before, because you could get a prototype together much easier, like because of the open source robot foundation, because of open
Hmm.
robotics, I should say, because of the simulations, because of what Amazon Web Services is doing,
Hmm.
um, you know, because of the Google infrastructure, because of what NVIDIA is doing. You can actually get a prototype. You can buy a robot arm to test
Hmm.
out your idea. So I think a lot of people aren't building everything from scratch. A lot of the code to get things, tried is out there already.
Already
And of course
there.
you have to modify it, right? But it's a whole different modifying it than creating the whole robot
Oh,
infrastructure
totally.
yourself, which is what we did at iRobot.
Hmm.
um, so um, you and in some applications that put together commercial pieces can actually be a product, and then as the product gets more and more successful, you might fine tune it.
Hmm.
In the turtle application, that's not true, because it really has the cost is king for consumers. You really do
Because you have
have
to
to
lower
design
the.
it from the ground up to get the costing that you need to get for consumer products. But I see people going into the industry now with these commercial, available infrastructures, and getting stuff together so much quicker than we could have ever dreamed of doing it in the past.
Before.
So,
I see. And so one thing that's interesting to me with this is it seems like a lot of the robotics prototypes, kind of as you've been saying with this, it's a lot of business to business transactions. But you guys are going business to consumer, and you were saying that for consumer products, you need to really design so that you can keep the cost as low as possible. There's a lot of business to business potential, I think, in robotics. Like if you're selling things to help stock shelves or do
right,
security
right.
guards or whatever it might be. But business to consumer is something that's been kind of hard for robotics to break into. I mean,
Mhm.
there's the Roomba and maybe the Tertill, Well, we'll see in the near future, but it seems like you might be connected
Right,
to two of the
right,
most successful ones.
right.
Uh,
But I would also put the DJI and the
oh, yeah,
Skydio drones in that mix.
you're right. Yeah.
Um,
Just
but
what do
you
you
know,
think?
there's been a few that are more, either a kind of bordering on a toy and a game, and I feel that those don't usually pan out over time. I really think it has to be a practical application that people have this real need
Yes.
for, and
Yeah.
then that the Roomba is cute and bleeps and bloops, and the turtle has a little pattern of sound as it takes off and stuff. I mean, I think that helps, but it's not the primary reason why people buy it.
It's not the value offer
Yeah,
for sure. Like it really does something useful
yeah.
rather than the charismatic beeps and boops being the whole value of the product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wonder, do you think the robotics consumer space will grow in this? Like that we'll keep finding ways of
Um,
having
I'm
useful
totally betting
robots?
on it. I'm totally betting on it because once you have, a robot cleaning your floors, mopping your floors,
Mm-hmm.
doing your pool, doing your
Mm.
lawn, doing your weeding, right? I think people,
Yeah.
look at it. It's like, why don't I have a robot to do these other things? The
Yeah.
problem is robots in unstructured environments are an
Are
actual challenge, right?
yes.
And so again, I do suggest cheating like we do with the turtle.
Yes.
um, uh, you know, because making it so it's robot, um, that you do the job robotically, like the Roomba going under beds and couches, makes it so they do something that you couldn't really do any other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. Do you so getting big picture again? Where do you see robotics going in the next, like, say, 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years? Like, what do you bet our life looks like, and how are robots around, or what's the robotics industry look like?
Oh, I mean, it's such a great time. But I think it's a little like um, some kind of like computers. Like there is a computer industry certainly, and I'm using one to communicate today. But there's computers in everything, right? And
Hmm.
I think there's going to be robotics in everything.
Hmm.
There's almost not a field I can think of, a physical field that you wouldn't want to have a robot addressing in the future. So I'm bullish on robots,
Yes.
obviously. Um, but all the jobs that people don't like doing. I mean, I constantly get requests, and nobody's cracked it yet. But I have seen prototypes, and um, uh, there's one company I invested in, uh, a tennis bot that's collecting tennis balls. If you're doing
Ah,
serving practice, it just goes out and collects tennis balls, and that's some of that technology. You think, well, that could have been done in the '90s, right? Because we had a little green ball chasing robot running around the company for a long time, but we didn't make it. Friends of ours did, and it was great fun, right? It just like
hmm.
you put a ball out and zoomed, and everyone's like, "I want that." It's like, but why?
I know.
And now they're making it to collect tennis balls, and
Mm,
um, I've seen people try to do folding the laundry. I haven't invested in that one, but
that seems
I mean, a
hard.
lot. Yeah, it's hard, but there's so many people who say to me, "I
That'd be
would
great.
buy it in a minute," right? Or
Yeah.
ironing, right? If you can come up with a robotic solution to some of these things that real people have to do every day.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what I think we're at with the turtle. Weeding is like lawn mowing. Um, I love the robot lawnmowers, right? But you can have someone come in and mow your lawn.
Hmm.
But weeding, it's actually hard to get someone to come in and weed for you because it's a job
Mm,
nobody really wants, right?
mm.
It's fiddly. It's out in the hot sun. There's no machine to do it really. It really is something that a lot of kind of like elbow grease, right?
Is required. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, wrapping up, you mentioned you're bullish in robotics. How do you see robotics as like important in a bigger picture sense? Like, why are you bullish in robotics?
Um, because I just see all the applications that robots can lend a hand to.
Hmm.
Um, uh, you know, it's important because I think that, like anything else, people worry about robots, people worried about computers, but I think they just add such. I mean, computers have added so much people couldn't have even predicted at the time that. In communications to doing this call virtually, right?
Hmm.
In the information we're able to access. Um, and robots, I think we don't even know what great things they're going to be able to um, accomplish yet, um, in keeping the environment safer, getting rid of the pesticide usage,
Hmm.
um, helping with you know getting geothermal, thermal, and wind farms going. Um, I would imagine if we do get fusion reactors, right, there'll be robots servicing them. I
Hmm.
could just see that they're an infrastructure that most everything's going to depend on to, to make it work.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great fun.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Helen Greiner. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Thank you again to our founding sponsor, Open Robotics. See you next time.